The air in the Montevideo house was thick with the scent of fresh paint, a chemical tang that did little to mask the silent, suffocating tension. In the center of the main room, a man who called himself Anton Künzler meticulously straightened the cufflink on his left sleeve, a polished piece of silver reflecting the room's single, bare bulb. His hand was steady, a testament to years of training in the art of emotional suppression. His Swiss watch, a Patek Philippe chosen for its understated projection of old-world wealth, showed 7:14 p.m. Through a cleverly concealed earpiece, no larger than a grain of rice and tuned to a specific, encrypted frequency, a single distorted click echoed. It was the signal from the surveillance team, a pair of agents disguised as a loving couple in a parked car across the street. They had visual. A dark sedan was approaching. Künzler let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The plan, codenamed Operation Sword of Gideon, a name chosen by the agency's more poetic old guard, had been in relentless, grinding motion for 11 months, 5 days, and 6 hours. Its success or catastrophic failure now rested on the next 10 minutes. In the adjoining bedroom, a space barely large enough for the 3 men crammed inside, the silence was a physical weight. They were the Nitsats, the Spark team, the operation's final word. They had been standing motionless in the dark for over an hour. One, a man known only as Oz, held a carpenter's hammer, its steel head wrapped in 3 layers of dense flannel to deaden the sound of impact against bone. Another, Danny, clutched a silenced Beretta Model 70. Its 7.65mm cartridges chosen not for their lethality, but for their subsonic velocity, ensuring the report would be little more than a cough. The third man, the team leader codenamed Gabby, monitored a compact radio receiver. Its single green diode was a fragile beacon in the darkness, a direct, scrambled link to the Mifrats, the command post in Tel Aviv, where Mayor Ahmed himself was listening. The team had prepared the room themselves, a meticulous 2-day process. They had stripped the walls to the studs, stapling industrial-grade acoustic foam before hanging new drywall. They paid a local contractor in cash to plaster and paint the single room, an untraceable transaction. They tested their handiwork by screaming passages from the Torah until their throats were raw, while the surveillance team across the street listened with a parabolic microphone. The result was a perfect, unnerving silence. The vehicle's engine cut out. A car door slammed, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet street. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path, a heavy, confident tread. The target was 5 minutes early. This was an unscheduled variable, a tiny crack in the perfect architecture of the plan. A bead of sweat traced a glacial path down Künzler's temple. He did not wipe it away. To do so would be an admission of anxiety, a flaw in the mask he had worn for nearly a year. He was the bait, the charming Austrian investor, the key that would turn the lock. His cover was a masterpiece of intelligence tradecraft, a legend so deep it had its own history, complete with backstopped Viennese bank accounts, a phantom portfolio of European real estate, and a carefully fabricated history of successful, slightly shady business dealings. It was a persona the target, a man defined by greed and vanity, would instinctively trust. The knock at the door was firm, almost arrogant. 3 solid raps. Künzler's mind became a cold engine of calculation, running through contingencies, timings, and points of failure. He took one final, steadying breath, smoothed his tie, and composed his features into a mask of avaricious bonhomie. He opened the door, a broad, practiced smile spreading across his face. "Herbert's, you made it. Come in, my friend, come in." Welcome to the first brick in our new empire." His eyes met those of Herberts Kukurs, the celebrated Latvian aviator, the Lindbergh of the Baltics, the man known to the world as a pioneering hero, but known to the men in the next room by a different name, the Butcher of Riga. The file that initiated Operation Sword of Gideon was designated Hangman. It landed on the desk of Mossad director Mir Amit in March 1964. Its contents a cold, methodical indictment. The question of Kukurs's guilt was not up for debate. The evidence, compiled by a dedicated unit of Holocaust survivors working within the agency, was absolute and irrefutable. It was a mosaic of horror, built from the sworn testimony of dozens who had escaped the Riga ghetto. They described Herberts Kukurs not as a low-level functionary or a reluctant soldier, but as a central, enthusiastic architect of the slaughter. One witness, a jeweler named Isaac, described watching Kukurs, drunk on schnapps, personally force a group of Jewish women to strip naked in the snow before shooting them one by one, laughing as they fell. Another statement from a woman named Riva recounted how Kukurs used the butt of his pistol to smash the skull of an elderly rabbi who was too slow to climb onto a truck bound for the Rumbala forest execution pits. The testimonies were consistent on one key point. Kukurs appeared to relish the violence, often singling out children for his particular brand of cruelty. He was not merely following orders, he was an artist of atrocity. The file, however, was not a call for prosecution. It was a strategic problem statement. Kukurs was not hiding in a Damascus slum or a Paraguayan jungle. He was living openly and proudly in São Paulo, Brazil. He owned and operated a popular tour boat business on the Guarapiranga Reservoir, was a respected member of the local flight club, and frequently gave interviews to newspapers where he would casually dismiss any questions about his past as communist propaganda. He was shielded by the Brazilian Constitution, which explicitly forbade the extradition of anyone for war crimes committed before its signing. Legally, he was untouchable. Politically, he was invisible. This presented a direct challenge to the new Mossad being forged by Mir Amit. Amit, a former Palmach commander and IDF general, had taken over from the legendary Isser Harel in 1963. Harel was a man of grand, ideological gestures, exemplified by the dramatic 1960 abduction of Adolf Eichmann from Argentina. The operation was a monumental success in terms of bringing a key architect of the Holocaust to justice. But the diplomatic fallout had been a near disaster, bringing Israel to the brink of censure by the UN Security Council. Prime Minister Levi Eshkol's directive to Amit for the Kukurs problem was therefore brutally pragmatic. Deliver justice, but do it quietly. No trial, no spectacle. No diplomatic incident. The order was for a quiet neutralization, an assassination that would leave a message without leaving a trail. The first man Amit selected for this new type of war was the agent who would become Anton Kunzle. His real name was Yakov Mossad, a German-born Jew whose family had escaped Berlin in 1938. Mossad was a psychological chameleon, a veteran of the Eichmann capture team who possessed an almost supernatural ability to create and inhabit a legend. His skill was not in deception, but in empathy. He could find the core desire of his target, greed, vanity, pride, and become the living embodiment of its fulfillment. For the vain and greedy Herberts Kukurs, Mossad would become a wealthy, action-oriented admirer, a man who saw Kukurs not as a war criminal, but as a fellow pioneer. The team built around Mossad was a collection of specialists, each representing Amit's new clinical approach. The communications expert, codenamed Gad, had spent 3 years in an Egyptian prison after his network was compromised. He had used that time to mentally deconstruct every radio system used by Arab intelligence, a skill that made him a master of both transmission and interception. The surveillance lead, a quiet woman named Miriam, had once tracked a Syrian arms dealer across 3 continents for 6 months, not by following the man, but by following the supply chain of his favorite brand of expensive Turkish cigarettes. The Nitsats team was drawn from Shayatet 13, the naval commandos, but they were chosen not just for their physical capabilities, but for their psychological profiles. Low empathy, high procedural discipline, and the ability to compartmentalize extreme violence. The geopolitical chessboard was a minefield. The Cold War was at its peak, and South America was a key battleground. The 1964 military coup in Brazil had installed a right-wing, anti-communist government that was tacitly friendly to the old Nazi networks, viewing them as a bulwark against leftist influence. The West German intelligence service, the BND, was known to be staffed by dozens of former SS and Wehrmacht officers, some of whom actively ran rat lines to protect their old comrades. An overt Israeli operation in Brazil would be seen as an act of aggression, potentially damaging delicate back-channel relationships with the Brazilian military. The intelligence spark that ignited the mission came from an unexpected source. A Latvian Jewish immigrant living in São Paulo, a tailor by trade, read a human interest story in the Sunday paper about the dashing aviator Herbert's Kukurs and his successful new life in Brazil. The tailor, who had been a boy in the Riga ghetto, recognized the name and the face in the photograph. He wrote a short, simple letter to the Israeli consulate. The letter was nearly discarded, lost in a sea of false leads and conspiracy theories. But a diligent junior analyst, herself the daughter of survivors, noticed a detail in the letter that matched a specific testimony from the Nuremberg archives. She flagged it. Within hours, the file was on a desk in Tel Aviv. The mission's genesis was not a single event, but the slow, dawning horror of this realization. The system of international justice had completely failed. Kukurs was not hiding. He was thriving, his hands washed clean by time and political indifference. Mayor Amit's problem was not to find a criminal, but to project the authority of a courtroom across an ocean into a sovereign nation, and deliver a death sentence that would echo through every Nazi haven on the planet. The creation of the Anton Kunzle persona was an operation in itself, a symphony of forgery, finance, and psychological warfare. In a sterile, windowless room in a Tel Aviv safe house, Mossad's document division worked for 3 weeks. They didn't just forge a passport, they created a life. They aged the paper, using a complex chemical process to replicate the natural oxidation of a document issued in Vienna in 1955. They used period-specific ink and a genuine Austrian government stamp stolen by an agent in Vienna years earlier. They created a driver's license, an international flight club membership, and business cards printed on a specific German card stock favored by European executives. Meanwhile, the agency's financial warfare unit, Tsomet, built Kunzle's economic backbone. They funneled money through a labyrinth of shell corporations, a textile importer in Liechtenstein, a shipping firm in Cyprus, a real estate holding company in Zurich, before depositing it into a newly opened account in Kunzle's name at a prestigious Viennese bank. The legend had to withstand not just casual scrutiny, but a deep financial background check if Kukurs got suspicious. In June 1964, Kunzle arrived in São Paulo, not with a whisper, but with a bang. He rented a suite at the lavish Hilton and began making a name for himself in the city's influential German and Austrian expatriate communities. He let it be known he was looking for a local partner with vision and nerve, for a new, ambitious tourism venture targeting wealthy Europeans. He spoke of helicopter tours over Iguazu Falls, luxury riverboat expeditions into the Amazon, and a private charter flight service. He was painting a picture of immense profit, a siren song for a man like Kukurs. The first contact was a masterclass in patient tradecraft. Kunzla discovered Kukurs was a proud member of the Interlagos Flight Club and a fanatic about his own small aircraft. Kunzla joined the club, but for a full month, he did not approach his target. Instead, he took flying lessons from the club's chief instructor, deliberately showing off his enthusiasm and deep pockets by paying for extra hours and talking loudly about his business plans. The gossip network of the club did the rest. Finally, on a blistering Saturday afternoon, Kunzla engineered the accidental meeting. Kukurs was on the tarmac, lovingly polishing the propeller of his plane. Kunzla approached, not as a businessman, but as a star-struck admirer. Herr Kukurs? The Herberts Kukurs? Forgive me, my name is Anton Kunzla. I've read about your flight to Gambia, a truly historic feat of aviation. He spoke for 10 minutes about engine types and navigational challenges, demonstrating a level of knowledge designed to impress the vain aviator. Kukurs, though wary, was hooked by the flattery. The relationship was cultivated over the next 3 months. They met for drinks at the club, for dinners at expensive restaurants. Kunzl was always probing, gathering human intelligence. He learned Kukurs was financially overextended, that his boat business was less successful than it appeared, and that his ego still burned with the desire for one last great adventure, one last moment of fame. Kukurs, for his part, saw in Kunzla a golden opportunity, a gullible rich man who could fund his dreams. He boasted of his connections with Brazilian officials and his unparalleled knowledge of the Amazon. But he never, not once, spoke of Latvia. It was a black hole in his history. The surveillance team, operating in a parallel, non-communicating cell, was the operation's safety net. They documented Kukurs's every move. They discovered his paranoia ran deep. He carried a Walther PPK pistol in an ankle holster. He varied his routes to and from his home. He had 2 local thugs on an informal retainer, men he would call to accompany him to meetings with new clients. These facts forced the team to scrap their initial plan of a simple abduction in São Paulo. The risk of a public gunfight was too high. The technology deployed was the best of its time, but its limitations were a constant source of tension. The primary communication tool was a Lear burst transmitter, a device concealed inside a leather briefcase that could send encrypted Morse code messages in a 0.3-second pulse. This made the transmission virtually undetectable, but its range was only 500 meters. This forced the communications agent, Gad, into dangerously close proximity to Kunzla during meetings, often sitting in a nearby cafe, pretending to read a newspaper, his hands sweating on the briefcase handle. Visual intelligence was gathered with a German-made Minox B camera, a marvel of miniaturization that could be concealed in the palm of a hand. The team also had a custom-built camera hidden inside a Zippo lighter. The problem was Kukurs's absolute phobia of being photographed, a remnant of his flight from Europe. Kunzla could only use the lighter cam in the most casual moments, making a show of lighting a cigarette. Each audible click of the shutter was a calculated risk. Developing the film was a nightmare, done in blacked-out hotel bathrooms using portable chemical kits. The acrid smell of the fixer was a constant threat, a scent that could lead to questions from hotel staff. Every exposed roll of film was a ticking bomb until it was passed to an El Al flight attendant who served as a diplomatic courier. The plan crystallized around a central idea. Cucurs had to be lured out of Brazil. An assassination in São Paulo, even if successful, would be a messy affair. The Brazilian federal police were notoriously thorough, and the political fallout would be uncontainable. The team's analysts identified Uruguay as the perfect theater of operations. Its intelligence services were fractured, its border controls with Brazil were notoriously lax, and Montevideo provided numerous options for a clandestine operation and, more importantly, multiple simultaneous exit routes by air and sea. Künzle began the final phase of the seduction. He told Cucurs the European backers were ready to commit, but were spooked by Brazil's recent military coup. They see it as unstable, Herberts, he explained over a brandy. They want the company's financial headquarters in a neutral, stable country. They are thinking of Uruguay, the Switzerland of South America. I need you to come to Montevideo with me, just for a day or two. Meet their representative, sign the papers. Then the first wire transfer will be made. The first major setback struck in late November 1964. A heart-stopping crisis that threatened to derail the entire operation. After agreeing in principle to the Montevideo trip, Cucurs suddenly vanished. He canceled a scheduled meeting with Künzle, his secretary citing a sudden bout of malaria. He stopped answering calls at his home and business. The surveillance team, Miriam and her partner, reported a dramatic shift in his pattern. He began using counter-surveillance driving techniques, making sudden U-turns, pulling over to watch the traffic behind him. He met with his two bodyguards, not at a cafe, but in the middle of a crowded public park. He was spooked, and the team was blind as to why. For 72 agonizing hours, Mayor Ahmet placed the operation on a total hold. No contact, no surveillance. The team in São Paulo was ordered to stay in their apartments. The silence was deafening. In Tel Aviv, the theories flew. Had Künzle's cover been blown? Had a rival intelligence agency detected them? Was Cucurs setting a trap of his own? Ahmet, ever the pragmatist, rejected the passive approach. He ordered Künzle to re-engage, but to do so on the offensive. It was a high-risk psychological gamble. Künzle called Cucurs's office and left a curt, angry message with his secretary. He didn't sound like a worried spy. He sounded like an insulted business partner. Tell Herr Cucurs that my associates in Zurich are not children, the message said. They have committed 7 figures to this venture based on my word. This disappearing act is unprofessional and is making them reconsider. If he has a problem, a local competitor, a police issue, he needs to tell me now. My reputation is on the line, and I will not have it tarnished. The gambit was a masterstroke of reverse psychology. Cucurs, terrified of losing the multi-million-dollar deal he believed was imminent, called back within the hour. He was profusely apologetic, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, a minor dispute with a local boat supplier that had made him overly cautious. To prove his commitment and salvage the deal, he became more eager than ever, practically begging to set a firm date for the Montevideo trip. He had been so focused on the money that he interpreted Künzle's aggression as a sign of legitimacy. He walked right back into the trap. Just as the team was recalibrating, a second, more chaotic threat emerged. A famous, self-promoting Nazi hunter, operating independently and funded by a German newspaper, had also tracked Cucurs to São Paulo. This man was a lone wolf. driven by ego and a desire for fame. He was clumsy and loud. In early January 1965, Miriam's team reported a shocking incident. The hunter had confronted Kukurs at his favorite cafe, shouting, "Murder! Schlechter von Riga! Murderer, butcher of Riga!" in front of 24 patrons. Kukurs had overturned his table and fled in a panic. The freelance hunter was a human grenade thrown into the delicate clockwork of the operation. He was drawing exactly the kind of attention Amit wanted to avoid. The Nitsats team leader, Gabi, argued for a hard solution, a staged street robbery to permanently silence the freelancer. Amit vetoed it. It was too risky and would bring even more police attention. Instead, Mossad's disinformation unit, Lohama Psychologit, was activated. They needed to misdirect the hunter. Within 48 hours, they had their plan. They used a cutout, a Brazilian journalist on Mossad's payroll, to plant a story in a rival newspaper. The story, complete with a subtly doctored photograph of another man created by Mossad's technical labs, suggested that the real Herberts Kukurs was living under the name Ernesto Fischer in the remote city of Belo Horizonte, some 300 miles north. The article hinted that the São Paulo Kukurs was a decoy. The freelancer, desperate for a scoop that would make his name, took the bait. He publicly announced he had a new, secret lead and left São Paulo in a cloud of self-important dust. The operational theater was clear once more. With the path clear, Kunzla finalized the logistics. He booked Kukurs a first-class ticket on Varig Airlines to Montevideo for February 23, 1965, along with a suite at the prestigious Victoria Plaza Hotel. Kukurs, now fully committed, even joked that he would need a new suitcase for all the money he was going to bring back. Meanwhile, the three-man Nitsats team entered Uruguay. They traveled separately, on different days, using forged Belgian and French passports. They rendezvoused at a predetermined location, a bus stop outside Montevideo's main stadium. They didn't speak. Gabi simply handed the other two a slip of paper with an address. The address was for a small, isolated house in the quiet seaside suburb of Carrasco, rented a week prior by a different Mossad agent who had already left the country. The house was chosen for its single-access road, its distance from immediate neighbors, and its 5-minute drive to the main highway leading to the international airport. For 4 days, the team prepared their kill room. They bought the tools from 3 different hardware stores across the city: a hammer, 20 meters of nylon rope, and a large reinforced wooden trunk sold for overseas shipping. They paid in cash, spoke only Spanish, and wore simple work clothes. Every item was meticulously wiped clean of fingerprints with alcohol and then handled only with gloves. The trap was now set, baited, and waiting. The final hours of Herbert's Kukurs unfolded with the cold precision of a military timetable. 7:05 p.m., February 23, 1965. Anton Kunzel's rented Ford Falcon, a deliberately unremarkable vehicle, pulls up to the grand entrance of the Victoria Plaza Hotel in Montevideo. Kukurs emerges, smiling, dressed in an expensive new suit purchased for the occasion. He believes he is on his way to a celebratory dinner where he will sign the papers that will make him a millionaire. He gets into the passenger seat, smelling of cologne and ambition. 7:14 p.m. The Falcon turns off the brightly lit coastal road and onto a dark, unpaved street in the Carrasco suburb. Kukurs, his city instincts kicking in, shifts in his seat. This is a strange place for a dinner, Anton. Kunzla gives a low chuckle, a sound he has practiced. My investors are eccentric. They value privacy above all else. We are meeting their man at a private office nearby. more secure. 7:19 p.m. The car's headlights sweep across the facade of a small, isolated house. A single light burns in the window. The car crunches to a stop on the gravel driveway. Across the street, in a parked car, Miriam whispers into her microphone. The package is at the door. This is the final signal. From this point on, the team is on its own. 7:20 p.m. Kunzla and Kukurs walk to the front door. Kunzel fumbles with the key for a moment, a deliberate gesture to appear casual. He unlocks the door and swings it open, gesturing Kukurs inside. After you, Herberts. Crucially, Kunzel remains in the doorway, his body framed by the opening, blocking the only exit. 7:15 p.m. Kukurs steps over the threshold into a completely empty living room. The air is sterile, smelling of wet paint. There is no furniture, no rugs, only the bare floorboards and the single harsh light from an exposed bulb. His smile falters. His eyes dart around the room, the hunter's instinct that had kept him alive for 20 years screaming that something is wrong. He turns back to Kunzla, his voice sharp. What is this? A joke? Where is the furniture? Where is your man? 7:22 p.m. Kunzel's pleasant mask dissolves. His face becomes a blank slate of cold duty. He speaks the trigger phrase, his German accent gone, replaced by a flat, formal Hebrew inflection he doesn't realize he's using. The property is even better than I described, isn't it? 7:24 p.m. It's the wrong phrase. The rehearsed line was in German. The slip, born of immense stress, momentarily confuses the Nitsats team in the next room. A fatal half-second of hesitation. Kukurs hears the foreign cadence and reacts instantly. Before the bedroom door can even open, he lunges, not at the empty space, but back towards the door. Towards Kunzla, a wild animal sensing the closing of the cage. 7:27 p.m. The bedroom door splinters open. The Nitsats team pours out. But Kukurs is already in motion. He is a powerfully built man, his body hardened by years of physical work. He collides with Oz, the first man through the door, with the force of a bull. Oz stumbles back, his head hitting the wall with a sickening thud. 7:31 p.m. Kukurs doesn't try to fight them all. He tries to escape. He grabs the standing lamp, the room's only furnishing, and swings it like a club, shattering the bulb and plunging the room into near darkness, lit only by the faint moonlight from the window. The fight is now a chaotic, grunting melee in the dark. 7:35 p.m. Donnie, the second agent, swings the muffled hammer, but in the confusion, the blow is clumsy, glancing off Kukurs' shoulder. Kukurs roars in pain and rage, grabbing Danny's arm and twisting, trying to wrench the weapon away. 7:40 p.m. Gabi, the team leader, realizes the plan has collapsed. This is no longer a clean execution. It's a brawl. He draws his silenced Beretta, but he can't get a clear shot in the tangle of bodies. He shoves past Oz and uses the pistol as a blunt instrument, bringing the heavy steel butt down twice on the back of Kukurs' head. The sound is a dull, wet crunch. 7:45 p.m. Kukurs staggers, dazed, blood pouring from his scalp. The fight goes out of him. He slumps to his knees. The team swarms him, their movements now precise and mechanical. The struggle is over. The execution begins. 7:21 p.m. They force him onto his stomach. While Oz and Danny hold his arms and legs, Gabi kneels beside Kukurs' head. He pushes the man's face to the floorboards. He leans in close, his lips next to Kukurs' ear. He does not shout. He whispers the sentence in Hebrew. In the name of the Jewish people. In the name of the 6 million. He then switches to German, for the benefit of the condemned. For the women and children of the Riga ghetto. For the burning of the synagogue. 7:25 p.m. Herbert's Kukers is executed. The method is brutal and final. 7:26 p.m. The team works in the dim light with practiced speed. They roll the body onto its back. Gabi takes a prepared document from his pocket. It is a typed sheet of paper, a formal judgment. He pins it to the lapel of Kukurs's expensive suit. They then lift the heavy body and force it into the large wooden trunk, folding the limbs to make it fit. 7:31 p.m. Kunzla is long gone. He is already on the other side of Montevideo, wiping down the Ford Falcon with alcohol before abandoning it in a pre-selected high-crime neighborhood where it will be stripped for parts within hours. 7:35 p.m. Gabi, Oz, and Danny walk out of the house, locking the door behind them. They do not run. They walk calmly to a different rental car, a Peugeot, parked 3 streets away. 90 minutes later, they are checking in for 3 separate flights at Carrasco International Airport. Gabi is flying to Paris, Oz to Frankfurt, Danny to Rome. They use different passports than the ones they entered with. The mission is complete. The immediate aftermath was an unnerving silence. For 6 days, the small house in Carrasco sat undisturbed. The assassins had paid for a month's rent in cash, so the landlord had no reason to check on the property. But by the 7th day, neighbors began to complain of a strange, sweet, foul odor carried on the sea breeze. On March 13, 1965, the police were called. They forced the front door and were met by the overwhelming stench of decay. The house was empty except for the large wooden trunk sitting in the middle of the living room. 2 officers pried open the lid. The discovery of the decomposing body inside sparked a media firestorm that began in Montevideo and quickly circled the globe. The identity of the victim as the notorious Nazi fugitive Herbert's Kukurs turned it into a sensation. But it was the note found pinned to his chest that elevated it from a mere murder to a historic event. Written in German, it was not a confession, but a formal, legalistic verdict. It began, regarding the grave accusations against the man Herbert's Kukurs, for which there is no statute of limitations, we, those who will never forget, have pronounced the sentence of death. It went on to list, in bullet points, his specific crimes. The burning of the Gogol Street synagogue with hundreds of living souls inside. The personal shooting of more than 30 Jewish civilians by the lake near Riga. The command of the Araj Commando during the massacres at Rumbula. The Uruguayan government, deeply embarrassed by an execution of this magnitude on its soil, launched one of the largest manhunts in its history. But they found nothing. The assassins had moved like ghosts, leaving behind no fingerprints, no witnesses, no forensic trail. Mossad, adhering to Mayor Amit's new doctrine, issued a curt no comment and denied all involvement. The true genius of the operation, however, was in the psychological fallout. In the Nazi expatriate communities of Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay, the news of Kukurs's fate landed like a bomb. It wasn't just that he had been killed, it was how he had been killed. He had been stalked, seduced by his own greed, judged and executed by a phantom court. The message was clear. No ocean was wide enough, no new identity was safe enough. Justice no longer required a courtroom. The final, chilling twist of the operation was revealed years later by a former Mossad officer. The mission's primary objective was not just to eliminate Kukurs, but to serve as the live-fire prototype for a new, broader campaign of psychological warfare, codenamed Damocles. The execution was Phase 1. Phase 2 began a month later. Mossad agents began a coordinated campaign of intimidation against other known Nazi fugitives. Joseph Mengele, living in Paraguay, received a package containing a single, used child's shoe. Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, living in Bolivia, would receive silent phone calls in the middle of the night. When he picked up, the only sound would be a recording of a crying baby. Others received anonymous letters containing only a photograph of the house in Carrasco or a single typed word: Kukurs. The operation's legacy was this new, terrifyingly efficient doctrine of deniable justice. It proved that Mossad could project lethal force anywhere in the world and then melt back into the shadows, leaving behind nothing but a message and a ghost. The death of Herbert's Kukurs was not an end. It was the beginning of a new, silent war, fought not in the courts of law, but in the dark alleys and quiet houses where the monsters of the past believed they were safe.